Hello, Internet. This is Chase Redshirt King Wassenaar, and welcome to a very special edition of the Rough Drafts podcast. This is an episode I've really wanted to do for a while now because I have, obviously, if you've been following the podcast long enough, you know I do a lot of writing for Unicorn. I've become a full-time member of that team very recently, which is super exciting, and hopefully you guys are tuning into all of that because we've started a really great momentum going on there. But the esports media scene is weird and complicated and, very young in a lot of key ways, and yet, very much on the cutting edge of some other things just because of the nature of the industry. And so I think there's a lot to talk about and break down and kind of analyze here, especially as we look at so many big events from 2012 as 2017. God, it's been a long day.
Long year too, right?
Oh God.
What year is this?
I am 12 and what is this? No, but we're going to get started with two people that I am very excited to have on the show today. The first one from the Flying Courier, it is Victoria Rose. Victoria, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Now that I remember what year it is, I'm 100%. All ready to go.
It's definitely the dog. I'm just gonna say that now. It's the dog, 100%.
Oh God, what an adorable dog too. And speaking of the adorable dog, the person who brought that dog into our lovely lives, Chris Chhopsky Pollock. Chris, how are you doing?
Hey, I am pretty good. It is Friday. I'm happy. I have a dog next to me. Oscar, come say hi. Come. Here we
Yes.
go. Here we go, little Oscar. Here we go. Here we go.
The important things.
Yeah, this is really the pinnacle of esports coverage right there. Like that's all I want from a site for sure. But I want to talk to you guys about what your journey in the esports scene has been and kind of how you landed where you are now, because both of you are established figures, I would say, by this point, who've have been very fun to follow personally. So Victoria, let's start with you. What did it take for you to kind of become the Dota 2 kind of analyst that you are now? And how does the Flying Courier's partnership with Polygon kind of shift things from maybe where you've been in the past?
Yeah, so I think most of where I've been has just been doing my own thing it started like I guess 2 years ago. I was just doing writing. I really wanted to get into esports. I figured, well, what's a skill I can use? And writing was really that for me. And so I started out Medium, and I still don't know exactly what inspired it, but I just kind of started. Eventually got dragged onto a few projects, the main one being Esports Express. We kind of did, which I guess has its own kind of weird rocky road at that point in esports media. But when that kind of like slowed down, I had an internship with the Meta for Killscreen, and that was their esports. It was partnered with Twitch, and it was their esports kind of vertical within that gaming magazine. That I finished school, that internship ended. They shut down anyway, and I think about a month or two later, I started PC. I guess word got out that I was kind of out and about, and so I got picked up by PC Gamer. And since then, I mean, it's kind of been a bit of a snowball. I've been with ESPN. I've been with Esports Insider. With them, I just do mobile games. And then, like, out of nowhere, I get this email from this very casual, "Hey, we need your response. This is a time-sensitive thing. By the way, I'm the CEO of Polygon." And it did pretty much come out like that because anyone who knows Chris Grant knows he's a very casual person in that regard. Yeah, so I got approached to work with Polygon on the Flying Courier on that site launch. So that's where I am now. And basically, we're just a Dota-focused satellite site. That's what we call it, satellite sites. We're the esports sites, whatever you want to call us. And our goal is just to do like very focused, content on the games instead of just like diving into the esports umbrella. We take things game by game. And that's where I am now. And yeah, I mean, sometimes I'll pop up on ESPN or PC Gamer as well, but that's, yeah.
Yeah, no, and I do like that, there are very few sites nowadays that can really focus on one thing and do that one thing really well. And it does feel like, just based on the way that it's been set up, you guys can afford to do that, which is nice to see. Now, Chhopsky, you to me, I find your project that you've started recently, Chhopsky TV, to be absolutely fascinating. So I'd love to hear, how did you get to the point where you wanted to set up a site like that, and how has that kind of treated you in the kind of early days that we're in right now?
Okay, so fun fact, I'm actually super old. I started in esports around about 17 years ago. Admittedly I was very young, but doing Counter-Strike LANs. This is CS, like when CS was in beta, when it was a Half-Life mod. And so that was kind of just an accident. Like, no one had ever even heard the word esports in Western culture before. So we didn't even know that this was a thing. We just thought, hey, this game's really cool. We should start like organizing LANs, and then it's turned into tournaments and so on and so forth. It just kind of snowballed out from there. And I kind of drifted away from things and wandered into the music industry and wandered into the tech world and did a whole bunch of other things for a while. But then the tech world led me back to Twitch. And that led me back to just check out what this thing had become. And my mind was just blown. I'm like, they're doing the thing that we did, except it's in a stadium. Oh my god, this is amazing. Yes, and that was around three years ago now. And then I just basically found my feet pretty much in there. Started getting into first into broadcast production, because there's so much similarity between audio production and there. And then one day one of our casters didn't show up to an event, so I started casting. And I guess pretty similar to Victoria's experience, someone from Polygon contacted me and said, we need someone, this is a time sensitive issue, can you come and cover worlds for us? So I was like, all right, yeah, yes I can. And that really just kind of launched me in from there. And it was just kind of gone on from there. And since launching me into the actual media sort of publishing side of things, then I've gotten myself embedded in this scene, and I've been to a couple of different worlds now. I've been to a bunch of events all over the world, and I guess I've started to see these, as the various sites start to shut down, that a lot of these places, as the market is kind of just contracting, and all of a sudden, what was a huge plethora of ways to get content and people that were getting a lot of experience, these just don't exist now. It's basically Polygon, ESPN, only a handful of others sitting around there at tier 2. And I realized one of the things that we saw in the music industry is that when new bands stopped having places to play, within 2 to 3 years the supply of new bands dried up, because there was nowhere for them to get the basic experience that they needed. And that's what kind of led me to Chhopsky TV, because I already had this site that I've been publishing my own articles on. Again, I guess kind of like Victoria, just as a place to put things. And then next thing I knew, I was buying content from people and giving them tips and doing their editing for them, and I guess here we are.
Yeah, no, it is. I feel like that pattern. Both of you guys have the started off kind of publishing on things. One thing kind of leads to another as it all snowballs, as you try to turn those little experiences into bigger ones. And that definitely, for me, it was Paravine back in the day. For people who remember the old Mundoverse, for going way back to the early League of Legends days. And I was working alongside guys like Kelsey Moser, Emily Rand, Pyrotechnics, who's a caster now, Daniel Dracos, a lot of these big name people. And then, they ended up leaving, that site closed, and there were a lot of people who hadn't quite gotten to that tier of experience yet, who didn't find a place. And I feel like that story of sites that do good work and are trying to help grow that next kind of wave of strong media personalities that can cover these events well, we're seeing things like what happened with Slingshot Esports recently. And Slingshot, and absolutely Rip. I've done podcasts for them. I like Andrew Kim. He's been on the pod a couple times before. So I guess I want to start with you, Chhopsky, because you've literally kind of taken on this site project to deal with this issue. Why do you think these sites have such a hard time being able to run at enough of a profit to keep themselves afloat? Why are these closures continuing to happen time and time again, even for sites like Slingshot that are making it to the front page on a regular basis?
Well, I mean, it's also just not about the amount of views that you get through. I mean, obviously there are problems with entirely ad-supported content for like web-based written things. This is just not viable in 2017, especially like the proliferation of ad block. But that's just a cop-out. Like the fact is, like, they get numbers and revenue, and there's statistics around exactly what's happening, and they can see those trends happening. But you'll happily look at streamers that are sending, getting thousands of dollars in single donations for content that people like to see. There is money out there. There's people with disposable incomes, and they want to spend it on esports and games. They do. They really do. Which leads me to and I hate to kind of BM my peers, but I don't think that people who get into this have really a lot of business experience in general. I mean, I can't speak for the owners of most of these sites because I don't know most of them, but I mean, so Chhopsky TV has been operating as like an independent media site for, a month now, and it's already more organized and automated than any outlet that I've worked for, because I have a background running businesses in entertainment. And maybe this is just my perception, but I feel like they were kind of not set up to make the most of what they had, which is, you've got a distributed base of staff, right? Like, you don't need offices. You don't need to spend most of the money that you are. There are very much more efficient ways to run things. And if you look at stuff that's still around, like Polygon, like I did a bunch of stuff for Rift Herald, and their system is most closely mirrored to the stuff that I'm running. It's also very close to the systems that they run at Riot and Twitch and a lot of the big companies, because you just can't afford to get away with wasting money, with inefficiency, with not communicating effectively, with not keeping organized and making sure that if you're paying for 40 hours a week of someone's time, you better actually utilize that. So I think it is a twofold thing, and it just, failure to capitalize on the amount of revenue that's out there, failure to organize in a way that actually minimizes wasteful expenditure, and just failure to adapt to what the internet actually looks like in 2017. And it's sad, because I came into this scene reading a lot of these places. These were the guys I looked up to when I first got in here, and now seeing journalists that I thought, wow, I hope I can write that well one day. And seeing them post like, hey, who wants to hire a writer? Like, that's so incredibly sad for me. The idea that they might have nowhere to go, and that talent. I don't know how to help with that yet. Echo, you do not know how to help with anything. You shut the fuck up. No one literally asked you.
Oh my goodness.
He likes the help from the esports company.
Oh, I'm gonna get so many ads now. No, this is fine. So, and I mean, the fact that that I can provide, I guess, a home for them to admittedly not make an incredible amount of money, because we're not we're only just starting out, but to also then give them a chance to contribute to bringing more writers into the scene and still achieve it. And let's be realistic, people do this because they love it. That's why. At their core, if you can provide people with an experience that they love, they will. What they're actually getting for it doesn't matter as much, as long as they can pay their bills. And so that's and honestly, I don't want to make it sound like we're taking advantage of everyone, because I'm not making any money off this. Leveraging what people are willing to do to contribute to the scene is literally how we've gotten this far, and we've got such an amazing team. Simultaneously at once, I think, of course this would happen. Look at these people. Of course they want to do things. And then I go, I can't believe this is happening. It's kind of a weird dissonance.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that, you nail it on the head when you talk about just careful forethought and planning out to maximize the resources that you can kind of afford to have. That was the thing that I noticed at Paravine that just sank that site, is that it wasn't very well organized, and they were taking on too many projects and then not enough projects, and it was inconsistent. And that'll get you every time, because then you're not able to plan ahead, then you're not able to structure things the way you need to keep yourself around in the long run. So Victoria, I'd love to hear from you. You know, having Polygon as a backer that can kind of, keep things afloat, even if maybe one portion of the site, one of these satellite sites, as you called it, is taking a loss. Do you feel like that's a way that we can kind of go in the long run of seeing those kinds of already established sites that have the structures in place, do know how to run the business because they have the organization that got them this far? Is that where you think we're going to a certain extent?
I want to believe that. Like, I generally do. And, like, I think the way that these sites were launched was kind of brilliant. Like, it did start with the Rift Herald and Flying Courier and actually Heroes Never Die, which is the Overwatch site that Cass Marshall runs. Were kind of stemmed by, really stemmed by the concept that, like, we can handle, like, individual, I guess, communities like that. And kind of we get to, what's really nice is that we don't think about the business too much as, like, getting good content out there, getting consistent content, things that people want to come back to, things that people look for. If you, most of the time I do, like, I focus on things that people will be like, what the heck is going on? Instead of, I think other sites have this focus on, like, we got to get this hot content out, we got to, blast out this mind-blowing whatever because they got to get the views. And it's nice to have that peace of mind in terms of, like, they're not going to, judge me for writing. Like, literally today I wrote, how do you explain Dota 2 to your loved ones? And I think that was a lot of criticism.
No, I mean,
to be clear, my grandma has been asking me to write that article for League of Legends for a while now. Like, please explain to me, as like a 70-something-year-old woman who doesn't know how to turn on my computer, how this game works, which is very adorable, if nothing else. Like, appreciate it.
Yeah, but for sure it's so it's been very good to, like, and I guess the other thing is that, like, we're able to focus on our own, like, strengths as a game. So, like, Overwatch has so much stuff about the culture, so much this and that. League of Legends is very well-rounded just because the scene is well-rounded, and I get to focus more on, like, esports. Like, it just kind of falls together well. But meanwhile, before I lose a thought, and I can rant on for, like, months about this, but Gamers, the company, basically did exactly what you described, which is picking up sites that have the structure, had the writers, had the content, and then literally locked half of them out of their accounts, like, which is what I heard happens. And dropped the sites. Half these sites don't exist anymore. I had to Google cache them to find them. And there are companies like that, and it's because I don't know what the intent was going to that project. I think it was to, take these sites that have the structure and kind of merge them into, like, one super content, like, universe. But it's very weird to, like, propose that and have that. And, like, I'm sure there are other companies that would love to do that and in a much better, much more efficient way. But we don't have that yet right now.
And that's actually now something really interesting because, like, I mean, like, if you, say, had to open a store tomorrow, right? Would you rather open, like, a store that sells every sporting good imaginable, or would you rather open, like, a lawn bowls store? And, like, there is actually a right answer to this, and it is the lawn bowls store, because you know exactly who wants lawn bowls. It's people who go to lawn bowls places. Whereas if you try and do everything at once, you can't really do anything well. And that's part of the reason that stuff like Flying Courier and Rift Herald and Heroes Never Die are so successful, because you get to focus on the one thing that you're good at, which is writing about Dota, and you don't have to worry about anything else. Like, it makes no sense to me to try and make people do things that are not the thing they're good at, and I don't know why anyone would want that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think there's an urge to, breadth over depth. Just having so many articles. Well, some of them will hit, right? Like, if we put out enough content, some of the content will do well because it's a numbers game. And, if we have everyone do all of the things, then maybe we don't need as many people. Like, it's approaching the problem, I think, in the exact wrong direction. And for the record, it's one of the reasons that I don't like Skyrim very much compared to other RPGs. Because you can do a ton of stuff in Skyrim for hundreds of hours, but it's all surface level. It's all done pretty, good. It's good. It's not great. So I think that rule definitely applies to any sort of industry. If you spread yourself thin, you're going to get exactly what you did to yourself there, and it makes marketing just a nightmare, I would imagine, to try to appeal to all of the people all of the time.
Yeah.
But I want to table this for a second. We're going to come back to kind of the lessons that I think sites can and should learn. But I want to talk to you guys about the content that we are getting right now, because the reason that this conversation started was actually a thread that I saw you in, Victoria, where you were talking about how frustrated you were that all of the world's talk was focused on Faker and him crying at the end of that loss and not on Samsung. And you came at it from this angle of, I don't think the right stories were accentuated. So I want to turn this to you. What do you mean when you talk about accentuating the right kinds of stories? What are the stories that the esports scene as a whole needs to do better about telling? What are we missing here?
I think, and I've actually had this conversation with with an editor of a very prominent esports vertical, and it is the human element. It's the way I put it with Faker was that we were talking about Faker, but Faker lost. Like, I think if LeBron lost, I think people would be focused on that, but then you'd also immediately also go back to the other side of whatever team, if the Nets finally, broke the, I actually don't know basketball, but if they finally broke the other team's, winning streak, you'd also focus on the Nets, But we didn't get enough of, I didn't know anything about Samsung until the week of Worlds. And they won. They had a chance at winning, and they did it. And it feels like it came out of nowhere to the West. Two Korean teams, it's League of Legends, it's two Korean teams. Obviously, there's going to be that sort of storyline. But when I looked around for, why is this team been doing so well throughout the season, I found, maybe one or, a few select articles. And yeah, exactly. You're definitely one of them.
And for the record, I agree with everything you're saying. What's one of the reasons I did try to focus on Samsung is I saw the gap was there, and you're always when you have a great editor, they always try to tell you not to worry about the views so much. Keep the content good and it'll get there. The views on that compared to the views I got in my Faker piece, it seems like a lot of the online community is geared in this one-track mind in the same way. So Chhopsky, I want to take this to you. How do we, as veterans of the esports scene, as we continue to try to grow this out as writers, how do we bring people into those kinds of stories? How do we get people to care about, say, a team like Samsung Galaxy that might not have the same star power, but has a real depth to them as a full
the
unit?
answer is that they do have the star power. If you follow LCK at all, which obviously I do because I'm a massive nerd, Samsung is massive. They've got incredible players that are, super famous. But, and this is, again, it's one of these things that sounds so obvious. People like stuff that they know. If someone tells me that Black King Bar was nerfed, I'm like, cool. That's cool. I've heard that name before. I know that it's a strong item. Rad. I don't care.
Well, I'd be screaming over here because you just collapse the entirety of half the game strategy.
You would be screaming anyway because this is what you do. But that's fine. Only when you're screaming at me to stop cheating. No, it's fine. the simple dumb answer is that you need to tell the stories long enough that people remember them and they remember the actors. You can't introduce someone and make them care about someone unless they've given you something special to hang on to, or at least enough exposure to continue telling the story and follow that actual trajectory. Because like Samsung winning doesn't mean anything to anyone unless you've seen them sort of come across, which is why like the story of Gigabyte Marines, or last year when we were looking at Albus Nox Luna, was why these guys have such a recognizable story, because they're these underdog stories coming from minor developing regions that are going to come up and then they just smash everyone in the face and then they win a bunch and they're like super loud and brash. Like that's an easily recognizable story that you can get on board. So that's your hook. That's what you hang on to. But in the case of a team that basically hasn't sort of developed their storyline, it's just like, this is another Korean team that played really good League of Legends and then they won. Like, that doesn't mean anything to anyone. So we need to follow ambition through, like, you can't just go, oh, he played his first game against Faker. Like, cool, no one cares. Like, literally no one cares. This is a made-up rivalry that means nothing to anyone involved. And you keep following the players and you humanize them and you tell their actual stories. Because, like, the reason we care about Faker crying is because we've been presented with Faker and Faker's personality for a really long time. You would see the same reaction to even, like, a mediocre, and I'm an A player, and I'm not going to name any because that would be super BM. But, like, all that you need to do is for people to actually recognize the personalities involved, whether that be through an explosive underdog win or through continued exposure to this to what's going on with them. It's actually not difficult. You just need to, and that's the difficult trade-off. And it is this thing that I keep coming back to with the Chhopsky TV site, is that it's just so easy to do a piece on Faker and get a whole bunch of views. But if you don't invest that time and effort into developing the new upcoming personalities, even personalities that are in the the best couple of people in the world at their game, if you don't tell people about that, they won't care. And Faker's going to retire at some point, or he'll like get his hands broken in a horrible tractor accident, and then that story's dead, and all of a sudden no one cares about LCK. Like my interview with Kakoma got like 400,000 views on YouTube, right? But I think the best interview I did at Worlds was like Ole or Daku from Misfits. Like, those guys gave amazing interviews. They had just so much insight into, like, their personal experience of it. And I came away from those glowing, thinking, wow, that was amazing. How can I possibly do better than that? But, Kakoma's the easy views. And there's my hearty YouTube ad rev. And if you're trying to, if you're just trying to struggle to survive and trying to pay the bills and keep the lights on, yeah, you write that Koma interview. You do it every time because you need to eat. And look, fair enough. Everyone needs to eat, probably. I don't know if Faker needs to eat. He's just a god. Probably just absorbs energy from the room around him. No,
That's the narrative.
He's actually super nice. He gets awkward about eating around people. It's very cute. But yeah, that again, it's the same thing as the Chhopsky TV site. Like, you invest in the future, or you just cut the future's legs off and it falls over and dies and bleeds out.
Yeah. I love your analogy, by the way, because you immediately reminded me of, like, everyone's read, like, that bad novel where some character comes in, like, 4/5 of the way through, and you're like, who the hell is this guy, and why are they a main character now? Why do I care about this? Like, it kind of just comes out of nowhere. Like, you do have to build that up, and you do have to have that bank to fall back to, and, whether, right now, like, I've been watching the North American Challenger event, the Scouting Grounds. Like, Riot has never built any of those players up. None of them are going, have like real stories behind it. So no one watched that event compared to Tyler 1, who's permabanned and did sell the event and did do all these kind of personality things that brought them up and got 300,000 people in his finals. Like, if you can convince people to care by establishing the reasons why they should care, eventually you kind of wear them down, but it's in getting to that point.
But that's the thing, is that they don't even have to be good players. Like, no one remembers any of the names of the players that beat the Stream Team Meme Dream Flame game. Like, all they know is that, like, a bunch of upstarts, like, smashed the old timers, and while a bald man shouted at things and clipped his microphone out terribly. And it was amazing. Like, it does not depend on players being good or at the top of their game or at the top of any game. It just has to be entertaining, and you can entertain people. If like you seriously can't think of ways to entertain people except for being the best in the world, then like just quit entertainment. Just leave, do something else.
Yeah. No, and that's, I mean, that's a very fair point. And I guess, Victoria, I want to switch this back to you now. You know, how do we, like, if someone is, you know, watching this and they're thinking, oh man, I can take this lesson and I can try to apply it. But they, you know, they'll say things like, I can't get interviews though, because no one knows who I am or whatever else. Like, how do we bring apart, you know, bring out those personalities more, even just from a like basic narrative standpoint? Are there things that, you know, people just don't look for enough, or are there, you know, do you think that, like, you know, is the answer that we all need to start watching streams more often and kind of get players from there? Like, where do you see the next step being taken if we're going to move this kind of thought forward?
I do think focusing on, like, I think just basically what Chhopsky's saying is most of it, really. Just going out there, finding the stories, finding the people. But I don't think people just want to hear about people. I think people want to hear about, like, esports has this really special case because in esports, we're not just talking about, like, you know, it's a spectator sport, but it's also a spectator sport that most people who watch the game have played before. So I think what would be effective is to, like, kind of bridge that gap between the player and the esports pro. So, like, I've always, whenever, I don't do too many interviews. When I do, I love talking to captains because they understand not just how to play, but their team. Like, they have such a personal and gameplay understanding of their team that when you ask them questions like, you know, how do you guys practice? And they'll talk about, like, you know, I got one captain from EG he was from Europe, and he was talking about, like, oh, I hate EU pubs. EU pubs are terrible. North American pubs are fantastic. And that didn't get that many views, but it was also probably one of the more interesting things I've gotten. And I think just, like, highlighting, like, you know, the small, like, oh my god, yes. All right. So bridge connection, where did I leave off? The captain. I think just finding details and just, like, the very mundane kind of details, I already said details, of, like, these professionals' lives, you know, in the game. Because we have this thing in common. We have, like, you know, League of Legends, Dota, Counter-Strike in common. That's such an easy thing, and it's so easy to miss. Like, you can talk about the professional things, but people want to hear about how they can get better, too.
Mm-hmm. I love, you know, I've been watching Unicorns Banks, James Banks has been doing a lot of interviews over at the ESL Pro League. And one of the things I always love is how many of the CSGO guys are like, man, I love PUBG. Like, PUBG is what I do to relax. And I'm like, that's relax? I mean, I guess, like, sure, like, whatever works for you. Like, I find that fascinating. I find, you know, what games people gravitate to, whether it's like a Hearthstone thing while they're waiting to load up in queue or whatever. Like, I think that tells you something about a person. And I think the key word there is person. These are people. They are not robots that play a game. And when you treat them as such and you ignore that human element, I think you both really nailed that.
Sorry. Go.
Go for it.
Like, on that, there was a really interesting, like, it's not even a podcast, it was a vodcast, I guess, where these guys, like, you know, try to compare and contrast the Star Wars prequels with the original trilogy. And they, like, so, you know, if you're asked to describe Han Solo, you say he's this dashing rogue, you know, he's a rebel, but he's got a heart of gold. And, you know, you describe Princess Leia and she's uptight and she's aggressive and angry, and but, you know, she gets things done. And then they ask them to describe any character from the prequels, like their person, without talking about what they're wearing or, like, what their job is. And you go, like, I don't know. Like, I can't, because they never developed any personalities. And that's just it. You develop the personalities, you show people the personalities, and you give them a chance to care about it. Because it's not, like, Star Wars isn't good because of lightsabers and robots. It's good because of the stories of the people that are traveling through that universe with you. And that's just the same thing with players. Like, show us the players, show us who they are, and, you know, the rest writes itself.
Yeah, I appreciate a good Red Letter Media reference, nice. By the way. So thank you for that. I want to get into another kind of big thing that's been coming up in the esports scene that relates to how we cover important things like free agency. This has been the big off season for a lot of different games right now, a lot of different moves going forward. And we're seeing, people are obviously they're all in on that content. They wanna find out all these things as soon as they can, so they can theory craft and do all those things that fans love to do. But then you get the people who leak false things or kind of break out, try to tell these stories that are just factually untrue, and then we see people like Otawamne make tweets of how his ability to get a contract this season was affected by a fake news story. So, Victoria, I want to start with you. How do we as a community have to handle when personalities like this start spreading fake news and they start gaining traction? Like, is that something that we as writers are responsible for kind of calling out and kind of keeping to a certain measure of standards? Is it something where we have to tell people to be more skeptical and try to get readers to more critically think about it? Where do we go with this kind of issue that's becoming more prevalent nowadays?
Yeah, well, I mean, firstly, we don't really deal with that in Dota too much. I have been kind of lurking in League, though. In Dota, it just doesn't happen because that's not what we find fascinating in the end of it. It is, in the end, we want to see what happens. We want to see, we see Eternal Envy eventually kick Puppy's ass because Puppy, didn't pay or whatever. It's to us, like, what actually happens in a game is, and I guess on stream is really, but I think, just from a media kind of standpoint, like media ethics standpoint, there's I think mostly the person who is, and I've been following very closely, like, the people you've been talking about, and they do have in a space, like, a responsibility whenever they say this may happen. Like, when they have a voice, when you have a megaphone, you don't, yell fire unless there's a fire. And, maybe it's really weird. Like, I think it should, at the same time, the people reading the media should have the literacy, but that's not something that we're, we as writers are necessarily responsible for. That's something that, it's something I'd love to address, like, if I ever go back to academia or something, but it's, like, actively, I don't want to say I'm not responsible for it, but readers should be better informed. That's the long and short of it. But you can't expect them to be. That's why that's why certain people are tasked with that. And you have to assume you have a degree of control over the information, and knowledge is power. And when you abuse that, you should be called out. You should be, ostracized by what could be your peers, even if you don't think they're your peers now, because that's what you're doing. You're doing their job, and you're probably ruining their job. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if anything, that kind of puts the onus on. It shows why more professional media is actually worth the money, because some guy with a blog and a Twitter page is accountable to no one. When you have an editor and a boss looking over you saying, like, if you tweet the thing that's not right, like, you're actually going to compromise your income. And, like, I get people want to, they want to do the thing, they want to get into the thing, and the best way to do that they think is being sensationalized. But I mean, if you look at Drexen, Esports Heaven, he had the story of Mark Merrill getting boosted like 4 years ago, whenever it happened. He got that, like, that week. And you know what he did with it? Nothing. Because it was not a good idea for him as a no one with no backup and no support to actually just go and drop that on them, because he didn't have the, heap of evidence, and it took him a while to sort of figure everything out. And, this is the thing, is that we do actually, regardless of whether or not you consider that to be, being afraid of whistleblowing or what have you, the fact is that when you have information that you either know for a fact, which is good, if Jacob Wolf level fact, I got this from 3 sources, or whether it's fact like, I overheard this in the scrim, you are responsible for what happens afterwards if you're, even if that information is true, when and how you present that into the public consciousness will affect how people interpret it, and how people interpret it will affect what they do with that information and how they react afterwards. And to a certain extent, that kind of shows the value of people with responsibilities, people for whom there are repercussions to their actions, like perhaps not having a job if you manage to screw up a player trade or so on and so forth. But that's some things that I think.
Yeah.
And editors are just, that's why editors exist, because they do vet your sources, and you have to have that back and forth. Is this story worth it? I think is a question that a professional will ask that an amateur will not necessarily ask, because for the amateur, what do they have to lose? They don't have the same incentives necessarily in place. Certainly they're losing an opportunity in the long run, but people intrinsically are kind of bad at judging that. People are very good at being able to understand something that's happening to them right now. How something will affect them 5-10 years down the line, we've got so many studies that show we are just not great at that as a species. So I think that certainly that there is a kind of journalistic level of integrity and structure that these guys should be bringing. But, someone like Jacob Wolf, when he sees these things, often points out that these gaps are there because there aren't a lot of people doing the investigative side of journalism in the esports scene. He would say that, we don't have a lot of people that are digging in for stories and are willing to, go out there and really, risk rubbing some people the wrong way, because for most sites, if you leaked a thing about, say, Cloud9, it doesn't matter whether you were correct or not. Cloud9's not going to do an interview with you anymore unless you are literally ESPN. So I guess, Victoria, do you think there's that kind of problem? Do you think that we need more people to kind of try to step up in that role, or do we need to maybe create a framework in which people feel comfortable trying to do that kind of work? Or is it just these are kind of excuses as to why these things exist in the first place? Where do you stand on it?
I definitely have opinions on that. I think that there do need to be more people, but I don't think that is the issue, because there are at least enough people in the scene to talk to that specialize in the games, in the communities, to go to share the information. It's on the esports side. It's not on the writer side at all. Like, let me tell you, there's one pro chat I lurk in sometimes, and they are fucking terrified of saying anything. I'm not exaggerating. They are absolutely horrified of leaks, because some of the stuff apparently going on backstage, and this is a massive community and a massive game. Some of the stuff apparently is just abhorrent. But if they share what happens with anyone, they're even more scared of what's going to happen to them. And I've gone things in Dota. I've heard some stuff by some companies. I don't want to share, because it's like, I don't want to put the people that are getting hired for those events at risk, because Dota is so small and all these communities are much smaller than you think. And the word incestuous gets used a lot, and that really describes it. Like, there are people basically, it's like, so for its size, for its magnitude in terms of presence, it's so small in terms of people that anything can affect anything in the long run. And journalists, I think being a responsible journalist does mean that you acknowledge that to a degree. And I've definitely heard things, and I just can't talk about them because, I just don't want these people in trouble. And there's only a select people who know about them. And that's part of the ethics of journalism. And that's, for instance, also why, when we hear about all this sexual harassment stuff, some of this stuff happened 15 years ago. But you can't talk. It's an open secret, but you can't just report it because, some of these people had, literal, basically, journalistic hitmen on them and lawyers. It's kind of a parallel, not similar, not the same thing, but, in terms of consequences, in terms of what you have to consider, in terms of the industries that are being considered and the how they're going to be affected. There's ethics to it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very interesting connection that you made, and it's something that I have experienced in my own writing. I've only really done one truly investigative piece ever. It was like 2.5 years ago when people were talking about, it was right when Team Ember entered the League of Legends scene and they released all their contracts publicly, and so it was that conversation of should we release them publicly or not, and Walter and I did a step-by-step breakdown of all of the statements that we saw on both sides, and almost everyone was kind of full of shit, but that's how these PR statements and everything are going to go, right? But we were able to gain access to a challenger contract, Stixace challenger contract to be specific, and we released that out on the League of Legends Reddit with obviously all personal info redacted. We're not crazy people or morons. And I got death threats, multiple death threats. It was a really harsh throwback because you have all these people, all they want to do is root for CLG, and how dare you say something? Clearly you're biased against them. It's not that you have this factual thing in front of you. It doesn't matter what that says. It's how they feel. And these are, very rabid communities that, whether we want to or not, a lot of times, views do matter. And if you alienate them entirely, well, good luck getting enough hits to be noticed by whatever that next site you want to go to is going to be. The consequences are there. And Chhopsky, I guess, how do you kind of view this as someone who's trying to do give writers a place to kind of learn this? This seems like a very important skill for a lot of young people to learn who are entering the scene. How do you approach teaching that lesson and also potentially teaching them how to deal with that backlash when inevitably people aren't happy that someone criticized a favorite team of theirs?
Look, actually, really good question. The answer is it's just straight up difficult because, you're absolutely right. It's not even about just outing these people that have shared secrets with you, but if you hear something because you're close to a team and then you release that, you can lose access to the team. This entire industry runs off reputations and personal relationships, and to be fair, all industries do. So without, I guess, a mutual, I don't want to say codependence, but without solid enough relationships that people can trust that you're going to do the right thing, the thing that you believe is right all the time. In my experience, people will generally work with you even if you're doing something that they disagree with, as long as you tell them beforehand and explain your reasoning. So, I covered the Tainted Minds disaster. So, little known fact, I actually used to / still do run Esports Professionals Association in Australia, in Oceania. And initially this organization was formed to kind of unite the teams together, both from an organizational goal of let's, they're all trying to do a bunch of the same things, they're wasting a bunch of money, let's, pool our resources, let's try and auto merge together, let's try and stop, hating each other so much that we won't even talk to each other on Twitter, trying to bridge some of those rifts in there. And then Tainted Minds happened. Jesus Christ. So, all of a sudden we're into 30-page documents of he says, lots of says. And, I actually ended up interviewing everyone involved there, did a bunch of phone interviews from, and I actually had cause to go back to Australia anyway so went on site and interviewed a bunch of people. And, getting to the actual root facts after talking to 8, 9, 10 people and trying to establish a factual timeline with causal series of events, it's actually just really difficult. And if I didn't have I guess a strong background in investigation of sorts, and admittedly very little of that is investigative journalism, but a lot of in sort of when I was doing a whole bunch of tech stuff, trying to find the root cause of something, you have to be incredibly scientific with what you know, what you think you know, what you might know but you don't, and what you don't know that you don't know. And those steps of investigation are pretty much the same no matter what you're trying to find out. And it's just about getting a scientific method for people down. And again, it comes back to the fact that there's not very many people doing it. Like, if you are the only person doing the thing and you burn someone and they won't talk to you anymore, like, that information is like that opportunity is now gone. Like, no one is ever going to look at them again. But if there's 100 other hungry journalists out there chomping at the bit to find the information, then that means that, you know, it's in people's best interest to give that information and to give the actual truth to the people that they trust and they have a good relationship with, that they know that they can release that in a responsible manner. And, you know, again, which actually builds the relationships. And, you know, I've had to write some pretty, you know, bad stuff about people that was true, but I called them beforehand and said, hey, here's the thing that we're going to write, and this is going to suck, but it's true, and people need to know. And they're like, yeah, all right. And we're actually still on pretty good terms with a bunch of those people now. And despite the absolute thrashing that I gave the ownership of Tainted Minds in the media at the time and in public and through Espas, we're actually on pretty good terms now, and we understand that, like, not, you know, people generally don't start evil, or they're doing things for their reasons, and their perceptions are what they are. And I don't know if anyone's ever watched Louis Theroux, but dude is an absolute god of investigative journalism, because he doesn't present any judgment at any point. He just goes to find out information. You see him interviewing KKK members and people who've committed genocide, and he's just asking them questions. And that's a really good start. If you don't have the time to learn to investigate properly, just ask questions to get at the information.
Yeah. No, and I think that, you know, that's how all of these kinds of, I mean, even like a non-investigative piece, like asking story, you know, the question of like, what story needs to be told here? What is the thing that matters most? But especially in investigative work, just having that awareness, I think, is so huge, and something that I hope, you know, people really take to heart, especially as we try to, you know, solidify this esports scene as a more professional atmosphere, and, you know, to create that mutual respect, I think, that you touched on, where, you know, you might not always agree with the actions that someone took or whatever else, but that's not what matters. What matters is you're telling the truth in a story, and you're presenting that in a way that is fair and reasonable, regardless of whatever that conclusion, you know, that you may draw, personal life, whatever. That's not what investigative journalism is about. I do want to close with one more thing before we wrap up here. You know, I think a lot of people would look at the esports scene right now, and, you know, the way that, you know, sites that have really struggled, you know, the certain types of journalists, and how easily, like, people can kind of fall out of the wayside. So I guess right now, I think this is a big moment for the esports industry to kind of figure these things out. So I want to start with you, Victoria. What do you want to see from the kind of esports coverage scene as a whole, from writers, from, you know, all these different websites? Like, what are the things that you most want people to do as we try to take the next step forward in establishing ourselves as serious journalists who know how to do things the right way?
I think just filling in the gaps for now is just really something that needs to get done. Like, you know, that's something we do, kind of Rift Herald, Flying Courier, etc. Because people are looking, you know, a lot of these people basically have dove into these games, you know, as their lives, and, you know, they want to engage with it. They want to, you know, find new ways to think about it, and, you know, just do things well, do things deeply, and, you know, just don't, you know, I think there's a lot to take from things that have closed, like Slingshots, you know, very independent, very upfront reporting style, you know, the Jacob Wolf type, Fiat on Fire type, and basically everything in between. But, like, don't, and, you know, Travis Gafford interviewing kind of thing, but, like, don't make that sorry. There's things to learn from them, but you don't have to make that your exclusive style. There is value in literally everything in between that. And, sites you're trying to do it all. And maybe people can do it all, but like sites can't. So they just need to, and in the same way that like games magazines, Waypoint's like actually a shit poster on social media, and then they get into like, what's the meaning of the shoe size of Sonic? And then they'll get into some actually really deep stuff, about the same games. But and then Polygon's a very frank take. They try to, we try to do like more original stuff, more original approaches. And IGN's very matter of every, just find a voice, and it doesn't have to be the same voice, like at all. And I think that's what a lot of the sites that ended up shutting down were doing. They were just kind of echoing off of each other a lot of the time. And when you echo, we also got a lot of the same issues that we saw at Worlds with the reporting, like the Faker situation, because these sites were bouncing off of each other all the time. Find something. I think these sites need to just figure themselves out, and the writers need to figure themselves out, and figure out what can I bring to the table. And maybe it is going to replace, Travis Gafford one day, but better, be better. What does it even say? I can't see.
Look at the glare there is.
It is immense.
I just realised you actually can't see this on my camera, but not the other one. It says Victoria loves LOL because you talk about it at any possible opportunity, and it's very cute. You've got a little crush.
I have a crush on League of Legends on Riot. Go fuck yourself. I have a hate crush. I have a hate crush on Riot, alright? No, but and you know what, Dota does need advice though, because I don't know Dota's in a very weird situation right now. I think I do focus the conversation because on League of Legends, because that's like 85% of esports content nowadays. It's because League of Legends has it figured out somehow. And it's not just Riot, it's like the third party people around it, like you guys have done some great stuff. ESPN does great stuff. All these sites do fantastic, fantastic work, and they have it figured out. And I think that's something that like a lot of other games want to replicate. It's just we haven't figured out what sticks yet over in Dota. So we're still in that process. But I think people just want to go on Reddit and be obnoxious and meme and. No, this is a Dota thing, I guess. Being obnoxious and being engaged. So I don't know.
That's a Dota thing?
I can tell you from my solo queue games, that's not a Dota thing. That's it's enough anonymity on the internet thing, I think, more than anything else.
It's the great internet fuckword theory. Anonymity plus
exactly
audience
right. But yeah, Chhopsky, same question to you. What do you want to see? What would you most like to see kind of improve and change as we move forward?
Difficult question. Actually, surprisingly difficult because it's a lot easier to like make small course corrections than it is to actually set like the actual course. I mean, the first thing I want to touch on is like that I just want you guys to think about is how long have I had that written out in front of me ready to hold up? The Victoria loves LOL sign. How many examples did it take for me to write that off screen? But I think there are a bunch of ways forward. And I've written pretty extensively about where I think the financials of esports need to go and how that's going to dictate the future of what happens. Because, I mean, like my dad was an accountant. So, he said, if you follow the money, you know how a business runs. And I don't want to say that crowdsourcing is the answer to everything, because that's dumb and it's a cop-out. Like a lot of people say, oh, we'll crowdsource it. And like, well, we're assuming that people want to give up their money for this thing. But we need to get better at understanding what people like and want and serving those needs. Because people like a lot of different stuff. Like, they really do. And one of the things that we tell new journalists, and they say, oh, what should I write about? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm not you. Like, what's your voice? Find your voice. But when you were talking about finding your voice before, I'm just sitting here, like, heartily nodding along going, yes, come to the dark side. And so, we need to help people find their voices, because, like, there are so many stories out there and so many different perspectives that, like, I can't even tell you what the other perspectives are going to be, because I don't know what people are going to want. I mean, my favorite story, the best thing that I've probably ever written was my World's Peace this year, and it was about some people that I met in a dog grooming salon. Like, there's no faker there, and like, I would have, the only reason that I found that is because I didn't go and stay at the same hotel as everyone. I wanted to just be really close to the venue because I'm lazy and I didn't want to carry all my gear. So, yeah, I think that, yeah, diversifying our perspective and letting what's interesting kind of rise to the top. And it's the same kind of thing that happened with the music industry when when everything went digital, when all of a sudden you could create a band's album, albeit not a particularly highly produced one, for like $100 on a home PC. You know, all of a sudden you went from having a small amount of content being created at the top that just had to be absorbed by everyone, and all of a sudden, like, when you could still have your $500,000 album, or you could have the $10 album, you find like all of these mid tiers of success and all of these other content creators just popped up, and it just expanded, and all of a sudden you get these like bizarre genres of like shoegaze, electro funk, or like I can't even remember half of the genres of like bands, shows that I went to that only existed because people had the tools and the opportunity to do a lot of this stuff. And fair enough, like anyone can start a medium, but it's just about expanding the scope of where the content's being created and telling people, you know what, you can do this. Because so many people I talk to think, they say, I really want to write. This actually happened yesterday. I was just having a DM with some random I met on Twitter. And they're like, I really would just be like an esports journalist, but like, I don't even know where to start. No one would hire me because I don't have any experience. And I'm like 17. I'm like, I was just trying to figure out if I was getting memed at first. I'm like, is this fun? Like, are you trying to do you know what we do here? And it's like, oh, do you have a website? Like, let me tell you about things. And these people are everywhere. And you talk to, even, in casting, like, you talk to people all over and like, oh, I'd love to try casting, but I'm just, no one will take me seriously. I'll get like made fun of, and I don't know where to start, and I don't know who to learn from. And then you bring them into a group of people who do it, and they're excellent at it, but they didn't know that they even could have done it. So let's just like slam the doors open, let everyone come in and just try their hand at things. Just be less salty on the internet, people. Like, everyone's going to be new at some time. Don't flame. Sorry, go on.
I'm gonna if anyone like is like, oh, this is the right way to do writing and journalism and esports, one more time I'm gonna freaking flip my desk off, track it, and slam it on someone's head, because it is like, people are saying like, oh, this is maybe it's the right way to do investigative journalism. It's not the right way to do esports. Esports is entertainment at the end of the day, and esports writing is another form of that. Just do what makes you happy, because somebody else is going to be happy because of it, because it shows. Trust me, it really, really shows. Like, your voice just freaking shines in esports, because otherwise everyone just sounds like one of those news spots that automatically makes news. Just don't be that news spot, please.
Yeah, please. I mean, honestly, like, your ability to form your own voice, to be your own person, that's how you stand out, right? Because no one else can be you. And that doesn't mean you're going to figure it out right away. I've been writing in some professional manners from 10 years, for 10 years now. When I was 16 writing for the local paper, I promise you I was shit. I can guarantee, like, I can bring out the articles, I guarantee you, but you get better by doing, and you get better by trying and by failing, and fail a lot and in different ways. And learn from those failures and grow from them, because it's you're not going to be perfect right away, and that's okay. And I highly encourage anyone who's watching this, if you want to reach out to me on Twitter, I'm at RedShirtKing. I am always happy to talk to people and look at an article and kind of give you at least some basic thoughts, because I want to help people the same way that I was helped when I was first getting into this. And I think that that's something we can all, anything that we can do to let people understand that, go for this. If this is what you really want to do, it's a lot of work, but if you really want to, you can get there, and you gotta give yourself the chance to try.
Yeah. Please just do the thing, because I've seen some fantastic people just do the thing on like even Reddit, and I'm like already eyeing them. Like, if I ever, start my own company, I'm hiring this person from Reddit because they wanted to do the thing, and they did it beautifully on their first shot. And like, some of them failed, and then they kept getting better. I saw them like 2 years later, and I'm like, wow, now that I'm actually a writer, I think this is fantastic,
I've hired 2 people
Just
from
do
Reddit
it.
already. Like, just people I saw in threads are like, wow, that was amazing. Like, where did you find
Yeah.
this? And they're like, oh, I just did the thing. It doesn't matter. Like, if you love doing the thing and you can afford to not, you can afford to do that, like, while you're paying for your life, just try it. Because, like, I don't know, that was just the most perfect thing that you said before, which is that no one else can be you. I honestly feel like no one can even say anything about the topic after that, because it just sums it up so beautifully. Do the thing. Like, if you don't feel confident, like, filling out the sign out form, or posting in Discord, like, send me a DM, send him a DM, send her a DM. Like, there are so many people out there that we are all super psyched that people want to do the thing, and whether it's like casting or journalism or broadcast production or to be a player, like, we know all of these things, or if we don't know them, we know who can help. Just ask people. Like, we don't buy it, and there are so many more people like us. We're just the ones that are in front of you right now, so just reach out to someone, doesn't matter who, just do the thing.
Yep. I think all of us have like literal calls with people who want to do the thing, and it's always a good time. So.
Yeah. Oh darn! I get to talk about a thing that I love
know,
with
right?
somebody who might also be passionate about it. What a shame, you know.
They always
What
feel
a
like,
waste of my time.
yeah, they always feel like they're bothering you. I'm like, no, this is great. You remind me of me when I was 17, and this is so exciting to get you see you go through these same feelings that I did when I first like talked to someone who was already doing stuff. Oh, see, look at me. I'm
Exactly.
like, I've got the vapors. Like,
See, we ended on a high note, and I think that's the right way to go. And thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you two so much for coming on to the show. It was great talking to you. Hopefully we can have you guys on again sometime, because I find you guys had just a lot of interesting things to say. And if people want to talk to you about the things that you had to say, or if they want to read your content and everything else, let's start with you, Victoria. Where can the nice people at home find you?
I am mostly on a flying courier nowadays, but I am on Twitter. I post way too much. If you're ready to have a flooded feed 24/7, come follow me on Twitter, Riningear. There was a little blue tick right there. I'm so proud of that still. It's so stupid. But yeah, no, come find me. Come reach out. I have emails there. Especially if you're a Dota writer, please come. I will definitely, if you're a girl in Dota, I will definitely follow you. If you're like, if you're trying to get a career, I don't know about careers, but if you just want to learn how to do the thing, I am more than willing to chat you up anytime. So, yay.
nice.
Perfect. What about you, Chhopsky? Where can people at home
So
find
Chhopsky
you?
is globally unique. You can basically just type Chhopsky into Google. There's Chhopsky. You actually can't see the thing now.
It's not the right camera. It's the wrong camera.
No, I'm doing the other camera. I've got that
the
camera.
other camera.
Yeah,
oh.
for the
Oh, the
There we go.
filming camera. All right.
There's the filming camera, and there's the. I don't know. Let's do
The
it.
Discord camera.
Perfect.
So
This-
And all of this is in the description as well, for the record.
so hit up Chhopsky TV, Chhopsky.tv, Twitch.tv/Chhopsky, Twitter.everything. Whatever. I'm just the Just slam that into Google. Honestly, like people got mad at me at first for not putting a phone number or an email address on my business card. I'm like, if you can't use Google, we aren't going to get along. So there we are.
That seems very fair to me. Well, thanks again so much for coming on. Come back next time, listeners at home. I have a special episode, kind of a silly episode, where I get in an argument with Matthew Galbraith, who's been on the show before, about the Marvel films. So if you would like to hear all of our thoughts and feels on what has been an incredible journey there, stay tuned. Stay tuned for all of the League of Legends things as we get closer to the season and those wonderful team-by-team previews. Goodbye, Internet.